Welcome to Moonlit Inc. BL. A story written under moonlight. Let's begin. Prologue. Mark Stone had a reputation, one he wore as casually as his expensive tailored suits. The office whispered it, the city gossiped about it, he was a Casanova through and through. He switched partners the way he changed ties in the morning, effortlessly, shamelessly, and with a smile that somehow made the whole thing look charming instead of cruel. And women and men still flocked to him. They always did. Who could blame them? The man stood a solid 6 feet tall, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, deep blue eyes that made people forget their names, and a tiny beauty mark beneath his right eye that drew attention like a magnet. It's unfair, Andy often thought. Someone shouldn't be allowed to look like that and also be a menace to society. But Mark never took relationships seriously. He didn't even pretend to. Feelings weren't his thing, confessions bored him, and the word love might as well have been written in a foreign language. What he craved was the attention, the thrill of being wanted, admired, adored. Giving anything back? Not part of the package. Unfortunately for Andy Flynn, Mark's best friend and long-suffering executive secretary, this meant dealing with the aftermath of his romantic disasters. Every breakup came with a pre-packed, sorry it didn't work out, gift basket that he, of all people, had to deliver. And every delivery ended the same way, Andy being yelled at, slapped, scratched, or, once, having an entire cup of bubble tea launched at his chest. He still couldn't drink taro milk without twitching. He wasn't an employee at this point, he was Mark's human shield. Or more accurately, his punching bag. But everything has a limit. And on one particularly exhausting morning, with dark lines under his eyes from the previous night's overtime and a faint bruise on his forearm courtesy of girlfriend number 23, Andy finally reached his. He marched into Mark's office, didn't even knock, dropped a crisp, neatly folded resignation letter on his desk, and before Mark could say anything, Andy muttered the words he'd rehearsed in his head 100 times. I quit. Mark blinked. Once. Twice. Andy didn't wait to see the third. Chapter 1, The Day Everything Fell Apart. Mark Stone had handled dozens of breakups, $100 million negotiations, and one terrifying meeting with a CEO who hated being contradicted. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for the moment Andy Flynn said, I quit. Effective immediately. The words echoed in his skull like a dropped glass. Andy, gone? His mind scrambled. Who would manage his schedule? Who would sort his emails from the fan mail and the hate mail? Who would pick his suits so he didn't accidentally wear navy and black together again? Crime against fashion, Andy once called it. He stood from his chair so fast it nearly toppled. No, this is not happening. Andy can't just leave. Mark strode out of his office, ignoring the startled looks from the staff. He found Andy in the secretarial bay, already explaining files and schedules to the other two secretaries, his voice calm and professional, as if he weren't unraveling Mark's entire life in real time. Andy, he called, hoping it came out steady. He didn't even look at him. All your schedules will be handled by the others from now on, Andy said, his tone clipped. I'm leaving. Something in his chest pinched. Weird. Uncomfortable. He didn't like it. Andy, wait. But he was already walking away. Andy. Mark's voice cracked louder than he intended, enough to make the entire executive floor freeze. He only ever used that tone in high-stakes meetings. Never at Andy. Andy turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Not cold. Not warm. Just tired. What? He asked, but it was the best friend Andy tone, the one he used when he's annoyed, definitely not the secretary tone. Mark swallowed. Can we talk? Like, seriously talk. He faced Mark fully, arms crossed. Talk about what, Mark? Your resignation. Mark hated how he stuttered. He never stuttered. But with Andy, his words always felt too big, too messy. "It's effective immediately," Andy said calmly. "I'm leaving now. All details of your preferences and schedule are already divided between the others. They'll manage. If they have questions, I'll answer by phone. But I won't be physically here." Andy's bluntness hit Mark harder than any breakup accusation he'd ever heard. "But, why are you leaving?" Mark asked, genuinely confused. Did I not pay you enough?" Andy let out a humorless laugh. "Tell me, Mark, do you only see me as your secretary and not your friend?" Mark froze. "As a friend," he continued, "I'm telling you now, I've had enough. I'm tired of your messes. I'm tired of cleaning them up. Good luck." And with that, he turned and headed for the elevators. Andy, he reached out, but the doors slid shut between them, leaving him staring at his own reflection, handsome, composed, and completely, utterly shaken. For a moment, he felt as if someone had slapped him. Hard. Why did it hurt? Why was his chest so tight? Why did Andy's expression, cold, detached, exhausted, keep replaying in his mind? He didn't know. All he knew was that the rest of the morning passed in a blur. He stared at spreadsheets he couldn't read. Emails he couldn't process. His pen sat in his hand unmoved for an hour. Everything he did felt wrong without Andy's commentary, his reminders, his soft sighs whenever he messed up. By afternoon he couldn't pretend anymore. He called the remaining secretaries into his office. "Cancel all my meetings for the day," he said curtly. "But, sir." "Cancel everything." He left the building without another word. He drove to Andy's apartment complex, barely remembering traffic lights. He rang the doorbell. No answer. He rang again. Still nothing. He called his phone. Straight to voicemail. Did he block me? He stared at his screen. He deserved it, probably. Mark ended up standing in front of Andy's door for hours, long after his legs ached, long after neighbors gave him curious looks. He waited for him to answer. He waited for the door to open. He waited for Andy to explain why he was leaving him like this, leaving him at all. But the door stayed closed. And for the first time in a long, long while, Mark Stone felt genuinely, helplessly lost. Chapter 2, The Longest Night. Andy had been inside his apartment the entire time. At first, when he peeked through the peephole and saw Mark Stone standing outside his door, hands in his pockets, expression stiff, he assumed he would leave after 10 minutes. Maybe 20. He doesn't do waiting, Andy reminded himself. Mark Stone didn't wait for anyone, not ex-girlfriends, not business partners, and certainly not the secretary who had just resigned without warning. But the minutes stretched into hours. Afternoon light dimmed. Evening shadows grew long. The building lights flickered on. And Mark was still there. Occasionally he rang the doorbell. Occasionally he called. Occasionally he knocked softly, like he was afraid of disturbing his neighbors. Andy sat on his couch hugging a pillow to his chest, stunned. What is he doing? Why is he not giving up? He told himself not to feel anything. Not sympathy. Not guilt. Not anything. But when Mark rang the bell again, his voice came through the door, strained, tired, and so un-Mark-like it made Andy's breath hitch. Andy. I know you're in there. Please talk to me. Please. Andy closed his eyes. His heart ached, just a tiny bit. Just enough to sting. But then the memories came rushing back. Being slapped by an angry ex. Having a smoothie splattered across his shirt. Cleaning up Mark's romantic chaos over and over and over. He hardened his voice and replied through the door, Go home, Mark. It's late. There was a pause, a small, wounded silence. It hurt him. Andy could tell. "Andy, please." Andy's fingers tightened on the door handle, but he didn't turn it. "Go home," he repeated, this time colder, because warmth would only weaken his resolve. For a long while, he heard nothing. Maybe Mark finally left. Maybe Mark finally understood. Andy didn't check. A few short hours of sleep later, Andy dragged himself out of bed, eyes gritty and head foggy. He rubbed his temples, replaying the scene from last night. He's probably gone by now. He has to be. But when he opened the door, he froze. Mark Stone was there. Still there. He sat crouched on the hallway floor, leaning against the wall beside his door. His head bobbed forward sleepily before snapping up again. His hair, usually styled perfectly, was a mess. His tie hung loose, his shirt wrinkled, his polished shoes scuffed from pacing. He looked nothing like the confident, untouchable playboy the world adored. He looked human. And exhausted. "You're still here," he breathed. Mark slowly stood, blinking up at him with dark circles under his eyes. "Andy, please. Let's talk." Even his voice was different, hoarse, worn down, fragile. Andy stared at him. This wasn't the Mark Stone he knew. He never waited. He never pleaded. He never lost sleep over anyone. Yet here he was, standing in front of his apartment at dawn like some lovesick puppy, or a man terrified of losing something important. Andy's resolve cracked. "Fine," he muttered. "Come in." Mark nodded, relief flooding his features. He stepped inside, but his movements were sluggish, heavy. Andy guided him to the couch, and he collapsed onto it with a tired exhale, slouching like he hadn't slept in days. "You're freezing," Andy whispered, startled by how cold Mark's hands looked. He went into the kitchen to make tea, glancing back every few seconds. But when Andy returned to the living room, Mark was already asleep. Head tilted to the side, breathing deep and slow. Like a child who finally ran out of fight. Andy sighed softly. He must have been dead tired to fall asleep that fast. Grumbling under his breath, Andy grabbed a blanket and draped it gently over him. He adjusted a pillow beneath his head, careful not to wake Mark. He stirred slightly, brow furrowing, before sinking back into sleep. Andy watched Mark for a long moment. He looked peaceful, but he looked vulnerable. He looked, not like Mark Stone at all. Andy crossed his arms and whispered with a tired huff, "Mark Stone, you really will be the death of me." Chapter 3, Cracks in the Armor. Mark woke up a few hours later with a violent flinch, nearly rolling right off Andy's couch. A startled sound escaped him, and he grabbed onto the cushions before disaster struck. Across from him, Andy sat cross-legged on the living room floor, scrolling on her laptop. He looked up, eyebrows raised. "What?" Andy asked flatly. Mark blinked, disoriented. "Where?" Then it hit him. Andy's apartment. His couch. Blanket. Pillow. Right. He practically camped outside Andy's door like a creep. Mark tried to speak, but the words tangled on his tongue. He never lost control of his voice, he was always composed, smooth, persuasive. Except, apparently, with Andy. Andy sighed, closing his laptop. "You look like you slept well. You should go home and get dressed. Your secretaries are frantic, you didn't show up to work this morning." Mark followed Andy's gaze at the clock on the wall and jolted. It was nearly 2 p.m. I slept that long? In his house? God, Andy must hate me. Mark thought. "I came here to talk," Mark said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He sounded weak. Hesitant. Nothing like the confident CEO who could charm investors in under 3 minutes. "Yes," Andy said. "You've been saying that since last night. So talk. What is it?" Andy's tone wasn't cold this time. Just tired. And that somehow hurt more. Mark swallowed. "I just want to know why, Andy. You're my best employee. And my best friend too." His expression crumpled slightly. "So why are you leaving me?" Andy stared at him with an intensity that made Mark straighten instinctively. Andy only used that look when someone was missing something painfully obvious. "Andy, please," he said, voice cracking. "Did I do something wrong?" Andy's shoulders sagged. He stood up and walked toward the window, his back to him. "Mark, we've known each other since high school," Andy began softly. "We know each other's habits, pet peeves, everything. I've been your secretary for 2 years. I know your business life is hectic and messy." Andy turned slightly, enough for him to see the exhaustion in his eyes. "But how can you ask me that? Do you really not know why I'm leaving?" Andy's words hit Mark like a brick wall. This wasn't the Andy who smacked him on the back of the head when he did something stupid. Not the Andy who dragged him home after parties. Not the Andy who warded off stalkers, dramatic exes, or crying girls who wouldn't let go of his arm. This was a version of Andy he'd never seen, detached, drained, and hurt. And he had put that look there. Mark's throat tightened. I'm sorry," he muttered, shoulders slumping. He couldn't look Andy in the eye. "I'll go." He stood, defeated, and walked toward the door. He didn't look back, because he wasn't sure he could handle seeing Andy's expression again. The hallway felt colder this time. He wasn't sure how he got back to his penthouse. Everything blurred: elevator, car, roads, front desk. He declined all calls, ignored messages, and shut the bedroom door behind him. Then he just sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "Why do I feel like this?" Andy had scolded him before. Yelled at him. Walked out of rooms when he was being unbearable. But this resignation, this distance, cut deeper. Why did it hurt so much when it was him? Why did seeing Andy's tired eyes make his chest squeeze painfully? What was this ache sitting heavily in his heart, refusing to leave? Mark Stone, Casanova, charming disaster, relationship phobic and emotionally detached, had no idea what this feeling was. And for the first time in years, he was terrified of the answer. Chapter 4, The Breaking Point. Mark had been a wreck for days. He didn't show up at the office. He didn't respond to calls. He didn't answer his door, even when his secretaries nearly broke it down in panic. He simply shut down. The Mark Stone the world knew, sharp, confident, annoyingly charming, vanished overnight. In his place was a hollow version of him, lying in bed with curtains closed, barely eating, barely moving, barely breathing. It felt like a piece of him was missing. Andy. He wasn't answering his calls. He wasn't replying to his texts. He wasn't saying hi, something he never skipped in all their years of friendship. This was different. He was gone, and the absence ripped something raw inside him. He'd endured sleepless nights closing million-dollar deals. He'd gone days working negotiations overseas. He'd survived stress far worse than this. But this was torture. Real, physical, suffocating. His chest ached. His stomach twisted. His mind replayed the look on Andy's face, cold, exhausted, distant. No matter how many times he tried to analyze what he'd done wrong, nothing made sense. "I don't understand," Mark thought over and over. "I know Andy. Don't I? We've been friends forever. So why does it feel like I don't know him at all?" He wasn't sure how many days passed, 3, 4. The world blurred together. Then, that evening, he heard the soft electronic beep of his penthouse door unlocking. Only one person knew the passcode. "Andy," he whispered, already sprinting toward the entryway. And there he was. Standing in front of him wearing an oversized hoodie with little cat ears, a takeout bag dangling from his hand. College memories hit him so hard he almost stumbled. "Your new secretaries begged me to see if you're still breathing," Andy said casually, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. Mark stared at him like Andy was a hallucination. Andy, however, moved through his kitchen with practiced ease, setting plates, opening cabinets, arranging utensils, the way he used to when he practically lived here during their university days. "Go wash up and eat," he said, turning on the coffee maker. "You look like the Walking Dead." Mark didn't move. He couldn't. He just stared. "Andy's here. He's actually here. I'm not dreaming." His heart hammered painfully. Then, before logic or pride could stop him, he rushed toward Andy and pulled him into a hug. A tight, desperate, bone-crushing hug. Andy froze. They'd hugged before, sure, victory hugs, jokes, celebrations. But this? This was different. This hug was heavy. Full of worry. Longing. Fear. Like he hadn't realized how much he needed Andy until he was gone. "Mark," and whispered against Mark's ear. He didn't answer, just tightened his arms as if Andy might disappear the second he let go. "Mark," he called again, more firmly. This time he pulled back slightly. And Andy saw Mark clearly. The dark circles under his eyes were so deep they looked bruised. His usually sharp features had dulled, cheeks a little sunken. His posture slumped in a way he'd never seen. "You're really here," Mark breathed. His voice cracked, actually cracked, which stunned Andy into silence. He had never, in all their years together, heard Mark Stone sound like that. Not scared. Not defeated. Not broken. Andy swallowed, worry blooming despite everything he told himself. What happened to him? Why did my resignation do this? "Go wash up, Mark," Andy murmured, gently pushing him toward his room. "And eat. Please." Mark paused at the doorway, turning back. "Will you stay?" The question was soft, uncertain. Too vulnerable. Not a command. A plea. Andy hesitated, just for a second. Was this the right thing to do? Should he be enabling this? But he looked so lost. So unlike himself. "Yes," Andy said finally. "I'll stay. For now. As Mark's friend. With boundaries." His secretaries had begged him to come, they said he had completely vanished after that day. No calls. No emails. No appearances. Not even to important investors. It wasn't like him. Not even close. Andy wandered around the penthouse as Mark showered, taking in the slight disarray, unwashed dishes, untouched food deliveries, discarded clothes. Andy sighed. Then his gaze landed on a photo frame on one of the shelves. Their college graduation. His arm slung around Mark's shoulder, both of them grinning like idiots. His parents behind them, filling in for Mark's, who'd missed the ceremony for business reasons. That day, they looked like two people who would tackle the world together. They looked like each other's person. Andy touched the frame lightly. "What happened to us?" he whispered. Or maybe, what happened to Mark? Andy wasn't sure. But one thing was clear, everything had changed. Chapter 5. Andy stayed. Mark still couldn't believe it. They sat across from each other at the dining table. Andy was quiet, focused on fixing the disaster that was Mark's schedule. It gnawed at him that Andy was here only to clean up his mess, again. "Andy," he said softly. Andy didn't look up, fingers still flying over Mark's tablet. Mark moved closer until he stood behind him. Andy paused, looking up at him. "What is it, Mark?" "I want to apologize," he whispered. Andy blinked. "You? Apologize?" "Yes," he breathed. "For being such an ass. For making you clean up my messes. For letting you take the hits from my relationships. For forgetting you're not just my secretary. You're my best friend. And I made you go through hell thinking you'd always be fine. I made you." Andy pressed his hand over Mark's mouth. "What are you saying?" Andy asked, stunned. Mark's eyes were exhausted but clear, clearer than they had been in years. He had spent days overthinking everything. Days realizing he hadn't just lost an employee. He had nearly lost someone irreplaceable. Someone he didn't just care about, someone he loved. Andy guided him to the couch and they sat side by side. Mark edged closer until their shoulders touched. Then he told Andy everything. How sorry he was. How blind he had been. How his resignation felt like losing a limb. How he had liked Andy for longer than he wanted to admit. How he had been afraid of ruining their friendship. How he didn't want to lose Andy, ever. Andy stared at him like he was speaking another language. Mark was confessing? Was he sick? Drunk? Out of his mind? But he kept talking, raw, earnest, terrified. Andy finally sighed. "Mark. I'm still your best friend. I just needed time to breathe. I've been your secretary for 2 years. Dealing with your exes, your tantrums, your messes, it drained me. I needed space. I needed to feel like a person again, not a shield." Mark trembled as Andy's words sank in. If he had been better, kinder, considerate, Andy might never have felt the need to run. "I'm sorry," Mike whispered. Andy rested a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Just be better, Mark." Relief washed over him, but it wasn't enough. He needed to feel him. Needed to hold him. Without thinking, he pulled Andy into another hug, desperate, overdue. He hugged him back. The touch sent a shiver through Mark, a good one. He wanted more. He wanted Andy. Chapter 6. The next few days made Mark realize just how much he had depended on Andy. His schedule, his suits, his entire life, everything used to run smoothly because he was there. Now, without him, the office felt hollow. His desk outside his door looked painfully empty. Right. Andy resigned. And he wasn't coming back. Even though they had talked a few days ago, Andy made no sign of returning to work. His new secretaries were scrambling in panic almost every hour. Every mistake they made irritated Mark. He never had this problem with Andy. He was always organized, always 2 steps ahead of him. He directed him, grounded him, and now he felt like a toddler forced to walk without holding his hand. When his secretaries handed him his schedule, they were practically shaking. It was overflowing, back-to-back meetings piled up after his week of missing in action. He felt overwhelmed just looking at it. Outside his office, the secretaries were whispering nervously. Andy used to handle all of this. He assigned tasks. He cleaned chaos. He made the impossible possible. And then, chaos arrived in high heels. A frantic ex-girlfriend stormed into the office. A famous celebrity, and a famously dramatic one. The secretaries tried to stop her, but she shoved past them. Mark stepped out of his office when he heard the commotion and found himself face to face with her. She screamed every insult she could think of and even hit him with her handbag. Hard. Mark didn't flinch. Not once. And that was the moment it hit him. Andy had endured this for 2 whole years. Breakups he caused. Drama he started. Pain he never bothered to witness. all dumped on Andy. The celebrity finally paused, hair wild, mascara smudged. "You heartless bastard," she spat. "I hope you die single." Then she stormed out, leaving the secretary stunned and Mark standing in the middle of the hallway like he'd just been slapped by reality. He quietly went back into his office, pretending nothing happened. But deep inside, something twisted sharply. He wanted to call Andy. He wanted to tell him he was the best person in his life, that he shouldn't have taken all of that for him. But wouldn't that make him an even bigger jerk? Dumping guilt on Andy now? He forced himself to work. He forced himself not to text Andy. Andy asked for space. Giving him that was the only right thing he could do. Outside, one secretary shakily dialed a number. "Andy, something happened." They explained everything. In response, Andy calmly told them to send the celebrity a limited edition bag she had been eyeing, along with a handwritten apology note. They were stunned. Andy has been doing this for 2 years. Andy then sent a link to the bag. They obeyed and ordered the bag under the company name. After hanging up, Andy returned to his book, but his mind drifted back to Mark. Now he knows what happens when he breaks hearts like they're nothing, he thought. The next few days were worse. Without Andy to keep him in line, Mark unraveled. Not by womanizing, but by drinking. It terrified the entire executive floor. Mark rarely touched alcohol, yet now he came in hungover or outright drunk. Meetings were rescheduled. Projects stalled. The company was losing its anchor. And then he collapsed. The secretaries called Andy in a panic. He rushed out of the bookstore he was browsing and went straight to the office. When he stepped onto the executive floor, everyone exhaled like they'd just seen a rescue team arrive. Andy gave instructions like he never left, clear, firm, precise. They moved instantly. Inside his office, he found Mark lying on the couch, looking like he aged 10 years in a week. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair a mess, and the smell of alcohol clung to him. Andy sighed, grabbed a blanket, and gently draped it over him. Then he did what he always did, he fixed his world. He color-coded the files, rearranged his schedule and marked priority proposals that he put things back where they belonged. Slowly, the office began to look like Mark again, not the man he is now, but the one he used to be. When Andy was done, he sat in the chair across from the couch and watched him sleep. His breathing was even, peaceful, vulnerable. First a womanizer, now an alcoholic. What next, Mark? He didn't whisper. He didn't care if the empty room heard his frustration, or if Mark, somewhere beneath the alcohol and exhaustion, heard him too. He just wanted to understand why his best friend was falling apart just because he asked for distance. Chapter 7. Mark was unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. After Andy came to the office to clean up the chaos and reorganize his schedule, he felt a momentary ease, but it didn't last. He was alone again, buried under the tight, merciless schedule he'd avoided for days. The secretaries continued to update Andy, and he quietly told them what to do. If he's drunk again, give him lemon water and make sure he drinks it. Order hangover soup and put it on his desk before noon. If he starts pacing toward the whiskey cabinet, distract him with reports he needs to sign. Andy was like an invisible commander, guiding everything without ever stepping into the building. And Mark had no idea he was still helping him. Mark was too preoccupied with only one thing, Andy. Thinking about Andy. Thinking about how to get him back into his life without suffocating him with demands. Thinking about how desperately he wanted Andy's attention, his presence, anything he could give him. He still hadn't given him a clear answer about his confession. He didn't know what they were now, friends? Something more? Something less? All he knew was that he felt stuck in place while Andy moved forward without him. And Mark hated it. He hated himself for letting it happen. Before he could stop himself, he dialed Andy's number. Once. Twice. Again. He finally picked up. "What is it, Mark?" he asked. His tone was cool, distant, nothing like the warm best friend he had always taken for granted. "I miss you," he said. "Dude, you just miss me fixing your mess." The breath caught in his chest. Because on some level, it was true. And it hurt. "I just want to see you," he said softly. "Please. Can we meet?" He didn't care if he sounded pathetic. He didn't care about pride, image, or dignity. He just wanted Andy. A long silence. Then. "Fine. Let's meet." He gave him the address of a small cafe near his apartment. Mark nearly leapt out of his seat in relief, but he forced himself to act normal. "Okay," Mark said, trying to steady his voice. "I'll see you later." When the call ended, the entire executive floor noticed an immediate shift. He looked like the old Mark again, serious, sharp, focused. They didn't know what happened, but they were simply grateful. That evening, he saw Andy already seated at the cafe. He wanted to run to him, hug him, kiss him, anything to tell Andy how much he'd missed him, but he held himself back. He sat down calmly, pretending to be composed even though every part of him was trembling. Andy looked detached, polite. Like he was meeting an old friend he wasn't quite sure about anymore. He talked about his new freelance job, how it gave him more flexibility and more time for himself. He mentioned office drama he encountered with clients, minus the physical assaults he used to endure on Mark's behalf. Mark winced, guilt twisting in his stomach. Andy noticed. "Look, I'm not guilt-tripping you, Mark," he said clearly. "I just feel more relaxed now. After your shenanigans." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry. I relied on you too much." Finally, he looked up and met Andy's eyes. "Andy. I miss you," he said. "I miss my best friend. I miss you scolding me, dragging me back on track. I miss you every day and it hurts so much." Andy's lips parted, startled by the sincerity, by the vulnerability he had never seen in him. "Mark, you." "Andy," he said, cutting him off gently. "I like you. To the point I'm going crazy. I drown myself in drinking just to quiet it down. I try to focus on work but my thoughts always drift back to you. I stopped going to parties because I only want to see you. But the distance." His voice cracked. "It's too much. Andy, please come back to me." He stared at him, overwhelmed. This was the second time he'd confessed. Andy wasn't sure if it was real, not after everything he'd seen him do. "Mark," he said softly. "I want to believe you. I really do. But after working for you for so long, I need more time." Mark closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. "I understand," he murmured. "But," Andy added carefully, "we can stay in touch. We can text. Just, don't push too much." A small, hopeful smile spread across Mark's face, one he hadn't seen since high school. Genuine. Warm. So rare. And for the first time in a long time, Mark felt like he might actually have a chance to win him back. Chapter 8. The next few days passed in a blur. Mark was trying, really trying, to piece things back together. And for once, Andy didn't push him away. It gave him something he hadn't felt in weeks, relief. Air in his lungs. A reason to breathe again. He wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but he was changing. The office noticed. Everyone noticed. The infamous Mark, the Casanova CEO, had gone completely silent. No new dating scandals. No photos of him stumbling out of a club. He still drank sometimes, especially on nights when loneliness clawed at him, but he tried to stop for Andy. He tried because he mattered. Then one morning, he didn't come to the office. And the entire executive floor froze. He's doing it again, one secretary said, pale. Call Andy, another whispered, already dialing. Andy's heart lurched when he saw the number flashing on his phone. He had been buying groceries, normal, peaceful things, yet the moment he heard Mark didn't show up, his stomach dropped. If he's drunk again, I swear, he muttered, already rushing to his car. The moment Andy stepped inside Mark's, he stopped. The place looked ransacked, not violently, but emotionally. Papers everywhere. Throw pillows on the floor. And on the table, photos of them. Every photo they'd taken in college, carefully laid out, almost as if he had been trying to put their memories back in order. Mark, he called softly. No answer. He walked upstairs, the bedroom door half open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. The stench of alcohol hit Andy immediately. Mark. A low grunt answered him. He flicked on the light. Mark was lying face down on the bed, half-dressed, surrounded by empty bottles. He looked shattered, as if the last pieces of him had finally snapped loose. Andy, he mumbled, turning his head slightly. He sat beside him and sighed in pure exasperation, though his fingers brushed Mark's hair away from his forehead with instinctive gentleness. You're drunk. Again. How many times did I tell you not to drown yourself in alcohol? It's the only way to forget, he whispered. Forget what? Mark closed his eyes, his voice breaking even in its drunken slur. That I hurt you, that I lost you once, and I can't, God, Andy, I can't lose you again. I've been trying, so hard to keep it together but... Andy's heart squeezed. Get up, he said quietly. We're talking. But first, you're getting a cold shower. Mark protested, muttered something, but he dragged him anyway. The moment the icy water hit him, he gasped awake. Clean up, Andy ordered. Then meet me downstairs. For the first time, Andy wasn't running from the truth. He wasn't dodging it. He wasn't hiding his own heart. He was ready. Mark came downstairs barefoot, hair damp, shirt clinging to his skin. He still looked wrecked, but at least he could stand without swaying. Andy had already cleaned the penthouse. Everything neatly sorted. Everything in place, like he'd slipped back into the role he'd once held without ever being asked. Andy looked up at him. Come here, he said softly. Mark obeyed, sitting beside him, too close, but he didn't move away. Mark, he began, exhaling slowly. You're destroying yourself. And it hurts me too. His head jerked slightly, but he didn't speak. I've seen you close multi-million-dollar deals. I've seen you stand at the top of the corporate world without blinking. I watched you build everything you have. And now I'm watching you fall apart. His voice softened. Why? Why are you doing this to yourself? Mark's breath shook. I'm still here, Mark. I never stopped being your friend. I never stopped caring. He placed his hand over his. Mark flinched at the contact, surprised, desperate, but he quickly held on to Andy's hand like it was the last steady thing in his world. Then he leaned forward and pulled Andy into his arms. Andy. I don't know what to do without you, he whispered into his shoulder. Texting you, hearing your voice, it wasn't enough. I feel like I'm drowning every day you're not beside me. I hate the distance. I hate waking up and not seeing you in the office. I hate that I caused all of this. Mark's voice cracked. I want you. I want you so badly I can't think straight. I can't work. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about you. Mark swallowed hard. I don't just like you, Andy. I think I... He took a shaky breath. I think I love you. Andy froze. For years he had pushed down his own feelings, terrified of what they could ruin, what they could break. Terrified of losing the one person he trusted most. But now he saw the truth, raw and trembling in front of him. "Mark," Andy whispered. "I guess I should confess too." Mark lifted his head, eyes wide, almost afraid to hope. "I like you too." Mark blinked. You do?" "Yes," Andy breathed out. "I just didn't understand my feelings. We've been friends so long, I thought the safest thing was to push you away. I didn't want to ruin our friendship. But in trying to protect what we had, I hurt you too." A long, shuddering sigh escaped Mark, as if months of fear finally loosened their grip. "Andy, none of this was your fault," he murmured. "I was the blind one. I didn't see you. I didn't see how much I needed you, not as a secretary, not even just as a best friend. I need you as something more." He leaned his head on Andy's shoulder, exhausted and honest. "I want you in my life, Andy. More than anything." Slowly, almost unconsciously, Andy ran his hand through Mar's hair, gentle, soothing, then pressed a soft kiss to his temple. "I kind of want that too," he whispered. And for the first time in a long time, the world finally felt right again. The mess was still there. The wound still healing. But they were facing it, together. Epilogue, 6 months later. 6 months passed, and the entire executive floor still swore the building felt lighter. Mark's office, once a battlefield of scattered documents, shattered routines, and the ghosts of his bad habits, was now almost unrecognizable. Structurally it was the same, yet something in the air had shifted. Calmer. Brighter. Steadier. As if the center of gravity had finally returned. Andy walked down the hallway with a tablet in hand, his ID badge no longer reading executive secretary but chief of staff. The secretaries greeted him the way people greet someone they trust with their lives. Which, in a way, they did. "Morning, Ms. Rivera." "Good morning, Andy. You look more handsome today, not that you don't always." Andy laughed, shaking his head. "Relax. You're all doing amazing. Let's have a smooth day, okay?" They melted in relief. Andy pushed open Mark's office door without knocking, a habit that once annoyed him, now something he depended on. Mark was there, as always, early and already focused. But he looked different from the man he was half a year ago. Healthier. Clearer-eyed. Softer around the edges in the best ways. The sharp suit, the confident posture, still there. But gone was the emptiness. Gone was the man who once mistook self-destruction for coping. Mark glanced up the moment he sensed Andy enter. "There's my favorite person," he said, voice warm in a way it was never for anyone else. "Your schedule's ready," Andy replied, placing the tablet on his desk. "And before you complain, yes, I left room for lunch." Real lunch, he emphasized. Not coffee and a handful of mints. Mark grinned. "You spoil me." "I ground you," he corrected, tapping Mark's forehead lightly. "The spoiling comes later." Mark's ears went slightly red. They still did that. Andy still loved that they did. Mark stood and tugged Andy toward him, wrapping his arms around his waist in a familiar, easy embrace. The kind of hug that didn't seek permission anymore, it simply belonged. "You know," he murmured into his chest, 6 months and I still can't believe you're here." "I never really left," he said. "You just needed time to find me properly." Mark pulled back, studying Andy's face like it was something sacred. "Thank you for not giving up on me," Mark said softly. "I almost did," he admitted gently, brushing his cheek with his thumb. "But you fought for yourself this time, not for me. That's what made me stay." Mark exhaled, long and full, as if his words untied the last knot in his chest. Outside, the secretaries peeked in when they thought no one noticed. Whispers of, "They're so cute," and, "Thank God he's normal now," floated through the hall. Andy and Mark didn't care. Andy kissed Mark's forehead, slow, steady, the kind of kiss that promised permanence. "Ready to work, partner?" Andy asked. Mark smiled. A real smile. The one Andy had missed for years and now saw every day. "With you?" "Always." And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it belonged. Thank you for listening under the same moon. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, you're always welcome here. Good night.